All right, we got ourselves a fun little Tzeentch roster reveal today, and it is going to be pretty juicy. We're going to be ripping through the legendary lords, the heroes, the missile units, the melee units, the monsters, the everything here in this video today. Now, in my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge in this video, let me give you just kind of a brief rundown of this roster reveal. And if you've been following everything up to this point, I'm just going to be totally honest with you, you've seen the entire roster. The only thing that this article is going to do for you today is confirm the presence of Chaos Warriors on horseback, Chaos Knights as it were. And we've seen them in the background of a lot of screenshots and what have you, but this kind of 100% reaffirms it for us. So in case you're wondering, this is what's going to confirm it. Now the roster itself and how Tzeentch is going to play is probably going to be very different to the other three demons, as to be expected. But well, I mean, when you take a look at Khorne is super straightforward, right? Like, okay, smash your head into their head and take their head with your axe. I mean, that's kind of pretty rudimentary. I mean, even taking a look at the Khorne campaign mechanics, which I did not cover, it's kind of just really one note. But Tzeentch, and from what we've already seen with his mechanics, is going to be very complex, and it's going to be the same way with his army. And I think that that is really awesome, because this looks to be one of those armies. It's probably going to be one of the more difficult ones to learn how to play in Total War Warhammer 3, because there are so many variables. A lot of the army is ranged or hybrid ranged. There's very few dedicated melee units, or at least that's what the roster says. But by counting, I think it's like 40% of the roster is melee. But we'll get back to that later in the video. But with that being said, too, it looks like it'll be high damage when from the range department, but it looks like it'll have low ammo. So it's very interesting. I think that a lot of the demon factions are going to play very horde style, very Zergy, in the sense of using a ton of lesser demons supported by bigger demons here and there. I mean, very similar to how Chaos Demons played as a singular demon faction in Warhammer 8th edition. So let's get started here on the actual roster reveal. If you are heading out and that's all you wanted to know, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. I cannot tell you how much that helps me or any content provider you watch. Also, if you've not yet pre-ordered Total War Warhammer 3 and you want to support the channel, you can do so using the Nexus link in my description and in the pinned comment. Nexus will get you a key directly from Creative Assembly, the developer in general, and they'll give it to you. Steam key, let me say it's a Steam key. But again, like I said, it is a great way to support the channel. But let's get started here on the Tzeentch roster reveal. And as you would expect, we're going to be starting with Kairos Fateweaver. This little 3-paragraph intro here just tells you, this is going to be very demon heavy, and to take a look at the Tzeentch campaign mechanics to get a little bit better of an idea for the feel of Tzeentch. And you can find that linked in the upper right corner if you want to get more info on the Tzeentch campaign mechanics and you missed them. But our first big daddy here is the big daddy, and it is Kairos Fateweaver. We've seen him in the trailer so far, and he is sick looking. He's even on the thumbnail. He's badass. And I love the new model for him. I love the Age of Sigmar new revised Tzeentch models that we're going to see for both Kairos Fateweaver and for the Exalted Lord of Change. I'm stoked on that because those are really nice, really high quality looking models that are just great to be brought into Total War Warhammer. Stoked on it. Now, for his unique skills and abilities, we get something pretty interesting. So he gets fragments of magic, and the way this works is it allows Kairos to acquire and equip fragments of other spell lores, giving him access to several spells from that lore. Only one fragment can be equipped at a time, which I fucking love. Because when we look at stuff like Teclis, or we look at Mazda Mundi, he can cast spells from all the lores of magic, but in Total War Warhammer it's represented by like 1 or 2 from a bunch of like random ass lores. It's cool here that he can seemingly socket this into his kit of abilities or spells that he can use. And so it gets me to wonder here, will this be how his magic lore works? Hey, he'll get 8 spells and he can just choose whatever he wants, or does he get the lore of Tzeentch, and then he can socket in additional spells as bound abilities that are only activatable once or twice per battle? I kind of wonder how that's going to work. It says only one fragment can be equipped at a time, but it says it does give other spells. So I assume that there's varying rarities, perhaps, of fragments. Like, hey, this is a green fragment. It's just not maybe going to give you 1 or 2 spells. This is a blue one. This is well, not purple. Purple's not in this game, but an orange one or something of the sort. So I wonder if there will be varying intensities or rarities of fragments that infer additional spells for Kairos to use, or if it maybe gives him an entire lore or spells from multiple lore. So interesting to see. Very stoked on it because it's a really cool way to bring that whole, he can cast every single spell in the game and this is how we're going to make it work. So I like how that is brought in. Staff of Tomorrow here is Kairos' powerful artifact that allows him to reduce all his spell cooldowns in an instant, which is beautiful. Gaze of Fate here paralyzes a unit to prevent its movement and vastly drops their melee attack. Now, I'm sure that Kairos will have a better profile than Sartorial, and Sartorial was not too shabby in combat. I think the biggest boon he had going for him was his ability to knock down smaller Lord characters and thus take advantage of that. But I'm wondering how much of a melee combatant Kairos will be. I still think, I mean, at the end of the day, he is still a greater demon, so he should be very competent in combat. But I mean, throwing him up against, say, any Bloodthirster, which is just a generic greater demon of Khorne, I feel like he should kind of just be around that level. Maybe not better than that, but still quite good because he is a super important character. Now, moving into the other Tzeentch Lords, we get the Exalted Lord of Change we just mentioned, and he will get access to both the lore of Metal and the lore of Tzeentch. We speculated on this, oh god, years back, and you can find that linked in the upper right corner, but you see that the actual spells we get are Blue Fire, Pink Fire, and Treason of Tzeentch, then Glean Magic, Tzeentch's Firestorm, and Infernal Gateway. Then Creative Assembly says here, this is a purely offensive school with 4 spells that deal direct damage and the others debuffing enemies to their doom. And I think we can get a good idea of which ones are the direct damage, right? Blue and Pink Fire are definitely direct damage. Tzeentch's Firestorm is definitely direct damage. And then I would look at Treason of Tzeentch and Glean Magic as your 2 debuffs, with Infernal Gateway as another possible direct damage spell. Infernal Gateway will probably be something of the sort where you cast it down and it has a cascading or exploding damage effect like we've seen, say, with like the Lore of Ice. But again, I've speculated this in the upper right corner. You can check that video out. We've also done the other ones for Lore of Slaanesh and Lore of Nurgle. And I'm really excited just to see how these spells look. We've already seen Glean of Magic cast in that trailer, Into the World of Tzeentch. So I'm stoked to see how some of the other ones look, because I'm sure they're just going to look beautiful. I think overall, when it comes to the visual aesthetic of Tzeentch, I've always really liked it, with like the blues, the purples, and the pinks, and purple's like my favorite color, so it all just plays hand in hand. Moving into Herald of Tzeentch here, we have our other Lord unit. And unlike the Big Daddy, and again, as you can see, this is the Age of Sigmar style of Lord of Change, which is awesome. You guys know how much I've been talking about how Total War Warhammer 3 should take the Chaos Demons Age of Sigmar, because they're all 8th edition Chaos Demons, just updated to better looking, polished models. And we're getting that, and I'm stoked on it. But into the Herald here, which I think is the Flux Master now in Age of Sigmar, which it just looks disgusting. Look at that little crab apple with its beak. Good lord. We saw this in the trailer though as well, and it can have either the spell lores of Metal or Tzeentch, and then it can mount a disc of Tzeentch or a Burning Chariot. A nice little switch up here. Of course, it can't ride a Screamer, but that's what the Burning Chariot is for. They'll get some nice little abilities there. So very straightforward. In fact, both of these have been pretty straightforward. There's nothing really kind of crazy to delve into. Even the lore here is nothing crazy or out of the norm. Like, I read through all the lore of everything. I'm like, oh, okay, seems pretty normal. Now, jumping into the heroes, we finally find out who those damn robed dudes are, and they are the Cultists of Tzeentch. So they will be a single entity, not a unit, because they are a hero, unfortunately. So what is cool about these guys is, you know, they're a hero unit, and they get access to the lore of fire. But here, let's read this part. It's pretty sweet. So, they have a unique access within the armies of Tzeentch to the lore of fire, making them a useful option for further battlefield damage and control. As they grow in power, they can also learn to summon demons direct from the Chaos realms, including Great Lords of Change themselves. While their time on the battlefield will be limited, their power is not. That is so awesome. So, They can ride a Chaos Steed, which is cool. Cast Lore of Fire, great. But the Lord of Change is a monster unit for the Tzeentch roster. So you can actually have an Exalted Lord of Change and then a Lord of Change on the battlefield alongside you. And this guy can summon one in. That is stupid strong. I love that. I love that you can just have another Lord of Change on your beck and call. I assume it says here that as they grow in power, they can also learn to summon demons direct from the Chaos Realms. I want to say Realm of Chaos. So I wonder if there's varying levels in which that they can summon. Like, hey, this is a 3 blip skill. You know what I mean? Like, it's got 3 little icons that are 3 little levels within it. And you can summon a unit of, let's just say, pink horrors. And then you can, I'm saying horrors, not whores, just so that we're clear, not pink whores onto the battlefield. That's Slaanesh. Or you can do an Exalted Flamer. And then maybe at the very top tier, so maybe 3, 9, and 12 levels at least, you can then summon a Lord of Change. Because it does say other demons onto the battlefield, so I wonder if we will have the option to summon, again, other demons other than just simply the Lord of Change. I think that'd be a really awesome ability here for the Cultists of Tzeentch, and I am stoked for it. Now, the other hero we get is the Iridescent Horror. These little guys are pretty straightforward. They have spells from the lore of Metal and Tzeentch, and then can ride a Disc of Tzeentch or Burning Chariot. Now, what's different between this one than the other one is it seems to be very much a support character. Their deadly skills are enhanced further with their Locust magics that allow them to greatly buff their allies at a moment's notice or summon more through portals to the Chaos Realms. So perhaps the Iridescent Horror can summon other horrors, and maybe the Cultists of Tzeentch can summon Flamers and Lords of Change. So, or maybe just simply Lords of Change. We'll have to figure this, we'll have to find it all out. But still, I think it's really cool that both of these heroes have a role, as either bringing fire or metal or Tzeentch on the other hand, and then they can summon a set of demons, it looks like, and I'm really, really stoked on that. And this also seems like it'll be maybe the assassin character. You know, clandestine worship of their god is more common, especially in Cathay, than other gods due to the secretive and manipulative nature. So I assume maybe that the Cultists of Tzeentch might be the assassin character on the campaign map for Tzeentch. Moving into the units, though, we get that Tzeentchian Infantry, starting out with the Blue Horrors of Tzeentch, like Slimer from Ghostbuster, and let's take a look at their notable characteristics here. So while classed as melee troops, as that's where their proficiency lies, Blue Horrors are capable of vomiting up magical fire. This gives them an impressive first punch on a charging enemy. All demons suffer from instability when their morale is low, making them begin to disintegrate on the spot rather than flee from battle. Despite their pathetic stature when compared to other more senior demons, Blue Horrors are still a fearful sight in for the mortals of the world, gibbering mouths and flailing deadly limbs. So definitely going to be a character that is going to cause fear. It'll have the instability that demons will have, which will probably play very similar to how undeads work and crumbling and decaying and everything like that. Crumbling away. But their other little classification here when it comes to melee and having that range capability, it makes me think that they'll kind of have, you know, something similar to a ranged attack that the Roman legionnaires had in Total War Rome, right? Okay, right as they charge into combat, they're going to vomit forth this really big blue fireball, and then they're going to dive into their enemy. Like a very short ranged attack that they can use maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times. You know, it seems to be that's how it will be done. You know, Blue Horrors are capable of vomiting up magical fire. This gives them an impressive first punch on a charging enemy. And maybe that's how they're going to counteract what seems to be very low armor and low melee defense, right? I would expect these to have moderate melee attack, low armor, low melee defense, and then some range damage that they can take advantage of, but they'll be able to cause fear. They won't have your normal kind of morale penalties as far as fleeing goes when you look at other chaff infantry, but they'll be able to just probably be brought in droves. Moving into the other infantry unit, we get the Forsaken of Tzeentch, and we've seen these plenty of times throughout the trailers, but they're simply going to be Tzeentch flavored Forsaken. And one thing I did not touch on, I deliberately waited to get to this region, is the barrier ability. So let's go right back here really quick to Kairos Fateweaver. So he, along with every other unit in a Tzeentch army, also comes with barrier. This is a damage shield that regenerates quickly outside of combat and protects against all harm, acting as effectively another health bar. It makes hit and run attacks with flyers, plenty of those you'll notice below, and cavalry is particularly effective, along with allowing you to cycle out your standard melee troops if applicable. So, it's also another area that can be buffed and altered through technology and skills, most of which are very powerful. So that is going to be very spicy when you put that in conjunction with Forsaken of Tzeentch. Remember, Forsaken already have a very nice, impressive damage profile because that's really what they're meant to do, right? They're glass cannons. But having the benefit of this barrier is going to really change up how they play because they're going to have a little bit more staying power because that barrier does regenerate. So you can throw them into combat, have them do some quick damage, and then basically cycle charge them, pull them out of combat, have them move to a different target. As long as they're not wrapped around, I don't see an issue with this. So it'll be interesting to see this because Forsaken also have a very high speed characteristic. So it should be able to pull in and out of combat, especially if you're fighting against any of the Cathayan units, which seem to be, from all the descriptions, seem to be slower on foot. So we have to see how that kind of plays out. But one of the very few dedicated melee-only ground units in Tzeentch's roster and vital for holding early battles in campaign. The madness of the Chaos Realms and the infection of their bodies makes Forsaken immune to psychology but liable to frenzy. Given their high armor compared to almost everything else on the Tzeentch roster, you're going to get a lot of use out of Forsaken depending on your playstyle anyway. So stoked to see what or how barrier really functions. I assume it would have a similar regen cycle to regenerate. Like, okay, regenerate only works when you're not directly in melee combat. So I wonder if that's how the regen portion of the barrier is going to work. We'll have to find out more once we find out more. But moving into the Missile Infantry, we get the pink horrors of Tzeentch. It sounds like I'm saying horrors, and I don't know how to enunciate horrors more over than horrors. So I'm just sticking with what I got. So what we get for the pink horrors is vomiting, burning hellfire spells, magical fiery doom for most other low tier units. So it seems like they're going to be doing a lot of high magic AP damage perhaps. Also boast greater melee capabilities than their blue cousins, making them a useful hybrid unit. Gibbering delighted buffoons, which I personally feel a distinct connection with. So the pinkies versus the blue boys. It looks like the blue boys, of course, are just going to be the cheapest ones. You can recruit them in mass, and it's just going to be your go-to throw in the front of the enemy and have them just do their thing. But it looks like the pinkies here will at least be able to hold their own, if not even better than the blue boys. But they're also going to be the mainstay of using tons of magic. Now let's take a look at their Exalted Bros, because they're pretty cool and they fit really well in with the Tzeentchian casting portion of all this, right? So we've got the pinks, but the Exalted version, just a further upgrade, right? But their concentrated warp fire will outdamage even the Celestial Dragon crossbows of Grand Cathay. So expect a huge amount of damage coming from these. And more importantly, their delight at magic and desire to see it increases Winds of Magic recharge rate for the army, stacking with each unit. That is huge. That's going to be a game changer for the entire army because, like I said, you're going to be using a lot of the synergies of this army. The barrier mechanic from the Tzeentch, from the mark of Tzeentch, as I'll call it, because that's kind of how they're trying to do it in this roster. You have all of these range characteristics, so a lot of range damage is going to be pumped out from your army. And we haven't even gotten into how the flamers are going to factor into all this and weakening things. You saw it in the little flamer trailer, but we'll talk about it later. So I'm stoked to see this now too with the Winds of Magic, because it allows you to use and tap into all of this different Winds of Magic that you can, all of these Lords of Magic you can use in Tzeentch. And it definitely seems like we're going to be getting some sort of change to the, well, we already know we're getting a change to the Winds of Magic system, but to the spell system in this game, since it is so heavily spell focused. When we look at Warhammer 1 and 2, obviously, yes, those are spell focused factions, but I mean, the Chaos Demons, each one has their own specific lore, and each one in of themselves is all about the Winds of Magic. And Cathay has such a heavy mechanic around having multiple casters in their armies. The same thing here around with the ice switches and everything for Kislev. So I think we'll probably be seeing some sort of change with the magic system itself, and that's actually very, very exciting. Let's move into the next set of units now for Tzeentch, and that's simply going to be the Cav and Chariot options. Like I talked about before, we get the Chaos Knights of Tzeentch. Now, these are your perpetual combat variant of Chaos Knights. They're not going to have lances. They seem to just simply have swords and shields. And what I like about this is that they're going to take that Tzeentch barrier mechanic and slap it on them. So while they will be your perpetual combat variant, they will probably have better capability to cycle charge, which again, this is not the cycle charging variant you want to use, but they have the ability to pull in and out of combat and retain health because of barrier, which I really, really, really like. Of course, though, heavily armored, unlikely to flee, and fast to strike, causing fear with their thunderous charge. Lack the massive impact charge of standard Cav, but are far more effective in a pitched battle. So cool to see them in the roster. Nice to see some representation of Chaos Knights outside of the Doom Knights, which we're about to talk about. I really am not stoked that I don't see any Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch. And I in general, that's kind of disappointing to me. I really want to see some Chaos Warriors like I saw for Khorne. But maybe that's coming as an undivided roster. We'll have to see. I don't really know, right? But the Doom Knights of Tzeentch here are going to be basically your shock cav variant for Tzeentch. And this is pretty interesting the way they're doing it here. So flying shock cav that are more than a match for any foe, trade their ground-born cavalry allies armor and defense for vastly superior speed and power. The strongest melee-focused unit in Tzeentch's arsenal. So definitely going to have lower armor is what it seems like. Won't have a horse with barding on it, but of course it'll have much more speed. And we've already seen that they've got halberds, or they're using halberds, and a shield. So I expect them to then have AP and anti-large, which would be pretty sweet. I mean, if they're as fast as I would assume that they're going to be, since they're going to be on discs of Tzeentch, it should be pretty wild to use these things to help take down big targets. And it seems like we're going to be plenty of big targets as we look at the other Chaos factions and Kislev and Cathay's rosters. So Doom Knights seem to be pretty cool. Again, really want to see those Warriors of Tzeentch on this roster. That's unfortunately the end of the mortals that we're going to be talking about here today. This is the only mortal representation in the Tzeentch roster, both the Chaos and Doom Knights, unfortunately. Well, I guess you could argue the Cultist is too, but moving on to the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch, we have an interesting unit as well. Now, this one has a Exalted Flamer on top. It's kind of spitting out flames everywhere. And it is, of course, a chariot unit, and it's got a big, huge, gigantic disc. So what's interesting, too, is that this thing has a seemingly high damage, short-ranged high damage output with low ammunition. So the range firepower of the Exalted Flamer, as is mounted on the Burning Chariot, is the strongest anywhere in the world, more than even siege weaponry. Such are the devastating energies being pulled from the warp by the Exalted Flamer, it will run out of power quickly, at which point it must contest with foes in melee. The combination of extremely fast, very powerful area attacks that can fly out of harm's way with ease is potent. So, a flying chariot unit that has the capability to do quite a bit of damage here. And we've seen this in a trailer, right? So it's not hovering off the ground, it's high up in the air. So this thing can kind of swoop down and do damage as it sees fit. And again, I'm wondering what its total range is going to be. The Flamer I never really saw as a super long range unit, so it's going to have to use the versatility and the flying capability of this actual, what's it called? Of the actual chariot to get up close and personal and do some scorching. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Flamer in just a bit, so I'll wait until we get there to talk about how I kind of see that low ammunition being a really high skill ceiling issue for Tzeentch, but also a really fun one at the same time. Let's now move into the monsters and beasts of Tzeentch with the Chaos Furies. And these are just run-of-the-mill Chaos Furies. They swap out the Frenzy of Khorne for the Barrier of Tzeentch, so then it gives them a little bit more staying power, pull in and out of combat as you see fit, and it's kind of your first foray into any flying unit for the army. But then we get the Screamers of Tzeentch, which we've seen again plenty throughout the all the trailers that we've seen Tzeentch in. And these are going to be your first intro to any kind of cav unit for Tzeentch as far as flying cav goes. So lightweight and unarmored, they are still powerful once locked in melee combat, acting as Tzeentch's equivalent of early cavalry. Must be quickly moved in and out of combat to exploit the barrier and their charge bonuses to its fullest. A giant flying blue sky shark that lets out a hearty scream at every opportunity. Who among us cannot identify? So I see these things, I kind of originally had envisioned them as maybe being carrion sized as far as like their number count and their unit, but it looks like maybe they'll actually be a larger sized unit. So I'm kind of curious to see how or what their real like punching power is going to be. Are they going to have a really high charge bonus like this? The notable characteristics a little bit lays it out for us, or are they going to be just, hey, this is more like Ice Wolves or Norscan Ice Wolves, something like that can do better damage than Chaos Warhounds, but not as great as, say, like a dedicated Illyrian Reavers, something like that. So I'm kind of curious to see how they'll kind of play out. But nonetheless, they should be pretty fun to dance around with. Looking at the spawn of Tzeentch, we get another big baddie, and we've seen this across a lot of other factions, right? Already with Khorne, we've seen it with Undivided. I'm sure we're going to see it with Nurgle and Slaanesh, but this is just simply a Tzeentch flavored spawn with its barrier slapped onto it, and of course, plenty of accoutrement like little weird pincers and stuff like that. The other beast here is the Lord of Change, which is lovely. It is a single entity, it is a monster, and it is a fully fledged spellcaster, as it denotes here. Can gain even more power and more powerful spells from various campaign technologies, which is really cool. Won't go toe-to-toe with a Bloodthirster, but it is still plenty powerful enough to lay waste to mortal formations. So I'm wondering too, like, what kind of technologies and what kind of expansions we can see on the Lord of Change. I would imagine it probably just pulls from the lore of Tzeentch, and you can, as you go through the technologies, get more spells that you can then use on the Lord of Change. And furthermore, are those spells going to be bound abilities, or are they going to pull directly from Winds of Magic? So that'll be interesting to see how that Lord of Change kind of factors into your army composition and everything of the sort. Now, onto the two Flamers of Tzeentch. We have the normal and the exalted. For the most part, they will be somewhat similar, but the exalted is a single entity. So the Flamers of Tzeentch, while not on the same level as the exalted Flamers, ground-bound or mounted, standard Flamers still output a ludicrous amount of damage and operate as small groups rather than solo. Much like Pink Horrors, will need careful placement to ensure maximum damage, but can annihilate when placed correctly. As a later game powerful monster unit that can still hold their own in melee combat, especially after applying a few burns to their victims. They also apply warp fire in melee, making any support fire very effective. So that's going to be the big thing here, I think, with Flamers and with the Burning Chariot and with the Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch, is getting that warp fire debuff on things with Flamers so that your Exalted Flamers and those Chariots and even other, it seems like that'll just have, in general, your damage is going to be outputted more. So getting that debuff is probably going to be very crucial to how your army operates and how your army can defeat foes. Because really the biggest staying power you're going to have is with your Furies. Not with your Furies, not with your Forsaken. Those things are probably going to be the things that are going to hold your front line together as much as possible with your spawn, because those are probably going to be the two hardiest units in the roster. So I imagine you're going to have to do a lot of swarming and flanking moves with Flamers for debuffs and with the blue dudes just to get a lot of frontline pressure so that you can use your range to just kind of supplement all that damage and just pour it on. So it'll be very interesting, like I said, to see how Tzeentch plays out, because it'll be so tricky at the same time of trying to stack all these debuffs and synergies together, which I love. So with the Exalted Flamer, likely to be the most powerful ranged attack on the battlefield, including siege weapons. Spray warp fire in a cone, making them extremely deadly against formations or single entities. The warp flame debuff increases damage taken from fire attacks, strengthening almost the entire Tzeentchian army against the target. So remember, I was saying I don't know how it's going to work. That's how it works. But low ammunition means that they will inevitably end up in close combat. They don't excel, but they will still hold their own. So that's going to be interesting too, right? You can't just kind of use these guys willy-nilly. You kind of have to be strategic about them. You have to use those warp fire debuffs. And I think that, hey, throwing a unit of Flamers of Tzeentch into combat to get the Warpfire debuffs so that your entire range line can start to do more damage, or Exalted Flamers or your Burning Chariots can really just kind of kick home, is going to be an interesting tactic depending upon the kind of relative cost of Flamers. Are they going to be something that you can stand to kind of get ripped up a little bit? They benefit from the buffs of the hero units that I mentioned before? Can you use your hero units to summon Flamers of Tzeentch to get those debuffs on your enemies? Those are some of the things we're going to need to find out how Tzeentch is going to play in the battlefield, because it's going to be pretty fun to layer a lot of these mechanics together, and it is going to be very intense, and it's very Tzeentchian. Now on to the big daddy here, the final unit, the Soul Grinder of Tzeentch. Now, compared to its Soul Grinder friends in the other factions, Tzeentch hurls a long-range anti-large set of magic spears at any targets. We saw this in the Cathay Siege video. You saw the Soul Grinder up against the gate. There was like 6 little balls that appeared around him. Then he just grabbed one and hurled it like a spear, and it was fucking sick. Magical attacks ensure maximum damage alongside armor piercing blue, which is a cool color. So that is the roster here for Tzeentch, and like I said, I think it's going to be a really fun faction. Khorne has always been my favorite of the 4 demons, but Tzeentch has been second in line. I despise Slaanesh because I don't tweak my nipples enough to really enjoy Slaanesh. But I think that Tzeentch is going to be really hard to play. And I think that this is going to be a much needed challenge, because I think that Khorne's going to be super straightforward. I think Nurgle's going to be very straightforward, and I think that Slaanesh is going to be very hectic. Slaanesh is probably going to be a lot of fast units, a lot of units that have to rely on physical resistance and some sort of quote-unquote dodge mechanic like we had with Witch Elves, whereas Tzeentch is going to be using a lot of layering mechanics to get the most out of each other, because it's the changer of ways and doing all these things, plans within plans within plans within plans. I kind of see the quote-unquote meta of these mechanics coming together for the roster, and it excites me. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's pretty goddamn cool. But go ahead and let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like I've said before, my biggest gripe here is that we do not see any Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch. The only mortal units are the Doom Knights and the Chaos Knights, which, I mean, while cool, I know this is like bottom tier, and like I shouldn't expect this as like an expectation. Like, I mean, as far as like, let me reverse here. I know this is like a bottom tier want, but just give me like blue Chaos Warriors, make their eyes glow blue, and call them Tzeentch Warriors and give them the barrier mechanic. That's all I want, you know? Like, I want to, at bare minimum, I would like them to be super Tzeentchian, you know? I would love that, but I really want to see Chaos Warriors in this list. And maybe the way Creative Assembly is thinking about this is, if we give every single faction a front line of Chaos Warriors, they'll all play the same. And I actually, thinking about that, I truly agree with that sentiment. Khorne's obviously a little bit more aggressive in the front line with double axes, and maybe you give pole arms to Nurgle, and maybe you just do double swords again for Slaanesh. I don't know, but either way, I could see that sentiment. That if we just gave every single Chaos Demon faction their Chaos Warrior representatives, then every single Chaos Demon faction would play exactly the same, minus the elements of their demons, which would have them do certain things differently. Well, not exactly the same. They would play loosely the same. So I could understand not wanting to do that for every Chaos Demon faction, but at the same time, it's kind of like a big thing, right? Like, hopefully we can get some sort of mark of Tzeentch or Nurgle or Khorne or Slaanesh units in an Warriors of Chaos undivided faction or something of the sort. But again, I'm really looking forward to or hearing something about the presence of God-flavored Chaos Warriors in some sort of reveal to come, hopefully, whatever it is. But again, like I said, guys, let me know in the comment section below what you feel, what you think you like the most about this roster, what you do not like what you don't like the most? Yeah, what you like the least, I guess. Any of that kind of sort of that fun action. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.